Hi there guys, got a video here for you today on the M3. So in this video what we're going to be doing is removing the front regulator and rebuilding it. So if you've seen my other videos you'll know that I do a little bit of work to the FX regulators just to make them a little better. And on this rifle I haven't touched the front regulator yet, so we're going to be stripping it down and I'll be rebuilding it and making some little changes to make it work a little better. Now before we begin, I can't recommend anyone try to take this off unless there's a problem. These front valves are extremely tight on the rifles and you may damage your block trying to get it out. So if there's not a problem with it or the front regulator is working fine, then just leave it alone. But having said that, this one seems to be working alright and I'm taking it apart anyway, so do what you like. Right then, with that out of the way, let's get started. So as you can see, I've already degassed the rifle to save us a little bit of time. To degas the rifle properly, all you do is take the bottle off and dry fire the rifle a couple times to empty the back regulator. When both regulator gauges read 0, I've got a digital one on the back here, but when they both read 0, the rifle's completely out of air. So next I'm going to take the bottom rail off, and this is just done with a 2.5mm Allen key and these 4 screws. Next I'm going to take my barrel out just to make it a little easier to manoeuvre for the camera. That's a 3mm Allen key in this hole back here. The M3 barrels are really quite tight, so you need to give it a bit of a tug and pull it out. This is a solid barrel, this is the BSA one that I converted. Now I've already pre-loosened my front valve. From the factory it was extremely tight. I think they do them up with impact guns, or that's what it feels like, because it was unreasonably tight in the rifle. But I've loosened my one, so my one's going to be a little easier to get out. If you haven't loosened your one before, you're going to need to take off a few things in order to get the block in the vise. So what I had to do with my one is take the 2 gauges off, so remove the covers, and then get an adjustable spanner across the flats and take the gauges off. I found a traditional spanner didn't fit very well on the gauges, so I had to use an adjustable. Next, take off the cocking handle. That's done with a 2.5mm Allen key in here. Just remove that. Remove the grip, and that's just with a 5mm Allen key down in that hole there. And then on this side, you have to remove the power wheel and the safety. The safety is under here. So the power wheel's taken off with a 2mm Allen key, then we have to undo these 2 screws here to reveal the safety. So I'll just quickly take that off and show you what's underneath. So with these 2 screws out, we can pop the cover plate off and that reveals the safety screw. Now again, this is just a 2mm Allen key, and once you undo that you can push the safety out. You do have to be careful as there is a spring and a ball there and it can fly out if you're not careful. So just be careful as you push it through and take the spring and the ball out with a pair of tweezers if you have them. Then last thing I needed to take off was the top rail. That's simply done by a 4mm Allen key in the front here and 2 2.5s at the back. Once that's off and everything else is away from the block, you can then grip the block in the vise with some nice rubber protection. I needed to grip mine quite tight in order to stop it slipping and to get a good purchase on the front valve. And then to remove the front regulator itself you're going to need a couple tools. Number 1 is a single hex socket. It needs to be a single hex, you can't use a double hex. So a single hex 24mm socket. Then I've got a breaker bar attached here. And then to protect the front of the block you're going to need a little Delrin spacer. Something I knocked up a little while ago for removing the front valves on impacts, and it's come in quite handy. So we'll put that over there. Attach our socket. Now I've already undone mine so it's not going to be that tight. Then crack it loose. And there is the front regulator. Now that was obviously quite loose, but the first time I tried to undo this it was extremely tight. I had to lean on the breaker bar quite a bit to get it to finally go, but in my rifle there wasn't any Loctite around the threads. You'd just done it up really quite tight. But anyway, there's a good look at the front regulator. This little slit here is what fills your bottle, and then it's obviously sealed off from the regulator piston at the back there. And that slot there goes all the way through and corresponds with that little notch there. This regulator does have a bleed as well, and this is an atmosphere bleed, and there's a little hole drilled in the piston chamber that bleeds. So you can test this for leaks if you want. Put a drop of oil over that, see if there's any bubbles coming out. And that would mean one of the O-rings inside the body has gone. Right, so let's take this apart. Right then, so this is a front regulator. At the front here we have a bottle connection. So this piece at the end here is what pushes on the little brass spacer on the new style bottles. So this is a 580 bottle that I converted to work on an M3, and the only conversion you need to do is that little brass sleeve in there. That widens the pin so that it catches on this edge here and opens the valve. If you just use a standard bottle from a Mark II or a Mark I, it won't work, as the pin will just go through the centre there. So that little brass sleeve is needed for bottles to work on an M3. I did make a batch and put them on eBay. So we'll just take a flat bladed screwdriver and take out this cover here. This exposes the little adjuster screw, and just like the regulator adjuster in the rifle, we can adjust the regulator pressure. So turning out or counterclockwise increases the reg pressure, and turning in decreases the reg pressure. So there's the adjuster there. A little different to the one in the rifle, it only has the one O-ring groove at the end here. So next we'll take out the O-ring on the back here. Then with something nice and soft like a little cocktail stick, we can push out the regulator piston and the little brass sleeve. Being careful of course of the Belleville washers. Just make sure that there's none in there. And there's the regulator piston and Belleville washers. So we'll stick this to one side. And there's the body of the front reg. So we have this O-ring on the outside, and then there is one in the body as well. It's the same O-ring that's in the body, the brass bodies that are in the rifle, but that one is present on the front valve as well. So if you're wondering what I do to the regs to make them a little better, all I do is I polish this face of the regulator piston and this face of the regulator adjuster. When in the rifle, these two faces seal against each other. So if they don't seal fully, what you'll get is a small amount of reg creep, as the regulator pressure is pushing on this side of the piston and forcing it to seal against this brass adjuster screw. So by polishing the two faces, you're getting a much better seal, and therefore you should get less regulator creep. Well, that's the theory anyway. I'll also probably just give the Bellevilles a quick polish. And there's the standard Belleville stack if you're interested. This regulator piston does use the smaller 8mm Belleville washers, so they're not interchangeable with the ones in the body of the rifle. But there they are. Right then, so I'll get these polished up and I'll bring you back when we're going to change all the O-rings. Right then guys, so that's the regulator cleaned up, and I've just given these two faces here a nice polish. So they're nice and shiny, they should seal against each other nicely, and we shouldn't get any creep. So it's all ready to go back together, so we'll start changing O-rings. First of all, this little one on the back of the brass collar, change that, and then just put a small amount of silicone grease on it. Using grease in this application, as hopefully I won't be taking the front valve out again, so grease will stay there a lot longer than oil. So grease is the lubrication of choice. Next, we'll stick the O-ring on the back of the piston. I already cut these ones off just to save a little time. And there's that one. Again, just a small amount of silicone grease around this. Next, we'll put the O-ring on the adjuster screw. And to do that, I'm just using my little witch's hat tool. We've only got one O-ring on this part. On the adjuster in the body there's two, so it's just a little easier. We'll just put some silicone grease around the witch's hat, and then the O-ring can just slide on like that. Just check the O-ring over, make sure that there's no tears or you haven't put any cuts in it, but this one's good. Next we'll pry out this face seal here, and then we'll just replace that. If you're curious about the sizes, you can view all the sizes on the FX website. Seat it nicely there, and then put a small amount of silicone grease around the face and just wipe the excess off with our fingers. Next one we have to take off is in this inner seal here. What I've got for that is just my pointy thing with a little bend in the end. It allows us to stab the side of the O-ring and then just push it through to the other side. Nice and easy. Then we'll just replace that one. So with these ones, what I find easiest to do is to get it in the hole there, and then using an Allen key, poke one side through, and then just seat the side that's facing up to us. And then once one side's seated, flip it over and push the other side up and into the seat. It's a bit hard to do for the camera. But there we go. O-ring seated all the way around. Then finally we'll just put a little bit of silicone grease on the inside, then wipe out the excess with a cotton bud. Next up we'll restack the Belleville washers. So on my rifle it was 2 one way, 2 the other way, and then just stacked pairs. With one odd one on the top. As you can see, I've given the Belleville washers a quick polish. All that does is make them seat more consistently. And then finally, as usual, we'll just add a little bit of dry lube to the Belleville washers. So we can go ahead and reinstall the piston and the brass sleeve in the back of the valve there, and then put the regulator adjuster in the top. So when I took my regulator adjuster out, it was just under flush, so I'm going to leave it there, pressurise the gun back up and see what that reads on the regulator gauge on the side. I'm aiming for about 100 bar. So we'll just put the front cap back on, and it's ready to be put back on the gun. Okay then, now that the front regulator has been rebuilt, it can be reinstalled on the rifle. So I'm not going to put any sealant on, just going to screw it back into the rifle. Put my little spacer on, then get it finger tight. Then, keeping a nice firm grip on the rifle, I'm just going to get this nice and tight. I think that'll do. Felt the O-ring compress, and if we look at the front here, we see that there's no gap between the front valve and the main block of the rifle. So that should be good enough. We'll obviously have to leak test the gun and make sure nothing's leaking, but I'm sure that will be sufficient. Right, so next I'm going to put the barrel back in, and then we'll do up the little 3mm grub screw at the back here. Before we pressurise the rifle, I just want to share a little tip that I've found out with these front bottle connections. My one from the factory was a little stiff, so what I've done is I've just put some moly grease on the threads, and it just helps make the bottle feel nice and smooth as it goes on. I wouldn't recommend this for the aluminium threads, but for the steel threads I think it works quite nicely. So just a very, very small dab will do you. Just on the beginning of the threads, and then as the bottle screws in there, it will work its way down, and then when we go to screw our bottle in, it should feel nice and smooth. Right, so we've just pressurised it up, and the regulator's only set of just under 50 bar. So what we're going to have to do is depressurise the gun again and readjust the front regulator. So we'll unscrew the bottle and then remove the front cap and adjust the regulator. Now this front regulator is quite sensitive to adjustment, so just do a little bit at a time. So we'll just go under half a turn there, reinstall the front cap and then repressurise the bottle. So still a little low, so I'm going to take the bottle off again and readjust the reg. I'll do this bit off camera as it's probably a little boring, but our goal is to get to about 100 bar on the front reg. Right then guys, there we have it. 100 bar on the front reg and we're ready to start testing again. Right then guys, that's going to about do it for this one. That was rebuilding the front reg in the M3. If I'm honest with you guys, I'm not overly struck on the dual reg system. I don't think it works as well as it should do. I think there's an issue with the front reg plenum being too small to fill the rear regulator. I don't know that for sure yet, but that's what it feels like to me. On my rifle, the front regulator has a bearing on power, i.e. if I leave the rifle and the front reg settles higher, then the power will rise only slightly, but it's enough to notice. So I'm hoping by rebuilding the front reg that will sort of cure that issue. But if I'm honest, the dual reg system isn't working as well as I thought it would. It might be very good for saving the back regulator, but for super consistency I don't think it's quite there yet. Also, while I've got you here, the BSA barrel that we put in the M3 didn't solve the point of impact shift. I'm still experimenting around with it, but if you were wondering how this helped, it helped slightly but didn't eliminate the problem. So what I'm going to be doing is trying some other things, but I'll show you exactly what I do in other videos. So for now guys, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.